They've trained you to think you see clearly, but you don't. What you call vision is surface-level input, filtered and shaped by a system that never wanted you to access what lies beneath. Since childhood, you've relied on 5 senses like a cage, never told there was a 6th. And it's not fantasy, it's anatomy. Hidden deep in your brain is the key to perception they never taught you to use: your third eye. This isn't spiritual fluff or vague mysticism. It's real, and it's been shut down on purpose. You were born with it wide open, intuitive, aware, connected, but slowly, systematically, they closed it. Through chemicals, routines, distractions, and ridicule, they buried your clearest sense beneath noise and disbelief. But here's the truth. It's still there, waiting, silent, undamaged. Once you awaken it, nothing will ever look the same again. Buried in the center of your brain is a small gland, no bigger than a grain of rice. Yet its potential is larger than anything you've been told about human perception. It's called the pineal gland. Most people have heard of it, but almost no one understands what it really is. That's not a coincidence. From ancient civilizations to modern science, this gland has been known as something far more than a regulatory body clock. The Egyptians depicted it as the Eye of Horus. The Hindus call it the seat of spiritual vision. In the West, it's been quietly labeled a mystery and largely ignored in biology textbooks. But the truth is, the pineal gland is your body's built-in antenna, designed not just to track time, but to perceive reality beyond the 5 senses. This gland is light-sensitive. It produces melatonin, regulating your circadian rhythm, your sleep, your biological flow. But its structure is unique. It actually has photoreceptive cells, just like your real eyes. And in some species, it is an actual third eye, visible on the surface of the head, complete with retina-like tissue. In humans, it's tucked away, but it hasn't lost its role. When fully functioning, the pineal gland allows you to tap into intuition, pattern recognition, symbolic language, and what many describe as downloads, a sense of knowing beyond linear thought. These aren't mystical fantasies. They're signs that you're using your neurology in a way you were never taught to. So why don't more people talk about it? Why has this part of the body, so central to ancient wisdom and human experience, been demoted to an irrelevant gland? Because perception is power. If you could see the truth behind the illusions sold to you every day, you'd stop buying them. If you knew how to tap into the subtle, energetic patterns of reality, you'd stop being so easy to manipulate. That's the threat the pineal gland poses to systems of control. An awakened mind questions. A connected soul doesn't comply out of fear. If you could access your full perception, you'd no longer need the intermediaries, be it media, religion, or external validation. You'd trust something deeper. That's why, slowly but deliberately, this gland has been neglected, ridiculed, and, worst of all, attacked. But we'll get into that soon. Now listen carefully. What we're discussing here only scratches the surface. Some things we simply can't talk about on YouTube. That's why we created Insights Academy, our free newsletter where we share what's too raw, too real, and too revealing for public platforms. Sign up at the link in the description and you'll get a free digital copy of the Kybalion, an ancient Hermetic text that reveals truths they've tried to erase. Limited time only. Back to the point. The pineal gland is central not just to your health, but to your sovereignty. When it's dormant, you feel like something's missing. Like you're drifting through a life that doesn't quite belong to you. That numbness, that disconnection, it's not a flaw in your personality. It's a symptom of a sense that's been shut down. The sense that gives depth to your reality. The sense that lets you feel truth even when you can't prove it. Science has already started catching up. Brain scans show changes in people who practice deep meditation. EEGs detect synchronized hemispheres in those who focus on pineal activation through breath and focus. In other words, the ancient knowledge was never wrong. It was just ahead of its time. And if the pineal gland is your antenna, your third eye, then it makes sense that they'd do everything they could to interfere with the signal. Not to help you, but to keep you blind. That's not an accident. That's a strategy. Because if you truly saw with your whole mind, You wouldn't just wake up, you'd walk away. From the narratives, from the noise, from the systems built on your sleep. And that's exactly what they fear most. If the pineal gland is your gateway to a higher form of perception, then what happens when that gateway is sealed shut? That's not a metaphor. That's exactly what's happened, and continues to happen, to billions of people across the world. And it's not because the gland fails on its own. It's because it's being targeted. The war on your mind isn't fought with guns. It's fought with chemicals, frequencies, and silence. The pineal gland, your third eye, is under constant attack, and the world you live in is the battlefield. Let's start with fluoride. It's marketed as a public health miracle. Added to the water supply, it's supposed to protect your teeth, make you healthier, and prevent disease. That's the story you were given. But there's another story, buried under studies, government denials, and a deep unease that follows anyone who questions it. Fluoride accumulates in the pineal gland more than almost any other part of the body. Scientific research, not spiritual blogs, has shown that calcium deposits form around the gland when exposed to fluoride over time. This process, calcification, hardens the gland, limiting its function, dulling its responsiveness, and slowly cutting off your access to non-physical perception. In other words, it's like pouring cement over your antenna and wondering why you can't receive a signal anymore. Of course, that's not mentioned in schools. That's not part of any public service announcement. But look around. The countries with the most widespread water fluoridation also happen to be the ones drowning in distraction, conformity, and mental health disorders. Coincidence? Or collateral damage from a strategy designed not to improve your health, but to weaken your clarity? Think about it. If you wanted to keep a population docile, easily influenced, and disconnected from their higher faculties, wouldn't it make sense to sabotage the one part of the brain that allows them to see through the illusion? But fluoride is just one layer. Add to it the electromagnetic fields you're exposed to daily, Wi-Fi signals, 5G towers, smartphones pressed to your temple, Bluetooth devices running 24/7. Your pineal gland is sensitive to electromagnetic activity. It responds to the natural frequencies of the earth, Schumann resonance, for example, but it also reacts to artificial ones. The result? Disrupted sleep, scrambled intuition, and an overstimulated nervous system that makes true inner stillness almost impossible. Then there's the food, loaded with preservatives, synthetic additives, artificial dyes. Almost nothing in the modern diet supports the pineal gland. In fact, most of it does the opposite. It numbs, clogs, slows, and distracts. It keeps your body busy digesting toxic sludge while your mind drowns in noise. No silence, no clarity, no vision. And if you think that's just accidental, think again. There is a multi-trillion-dollar ecosystem built on your inability to think clearly. Pharmaceutical companies sell you the cure for symptoms caused by the very diet and environment they help perpetuate. Media companies keep you addicted to short-form stimulation, lowering your attention span and flooding your brain with stress chemicals. And all the while, the one part of your brain designed to connect you to something deeper is being hardened, ridiculed, and ignored. This isn't science fiction. This is science they don't want to fund anymore. Because the more people start asking questions about the pineal gland, about fluoride, about frequencies, the more cracks form in the lie. And once enough cracks form, the whole illusion begins to collapse. It's not that awakening is impossible. It's that awakening is inconvenient. Not for you, but for them. Because a society full of individuals who trust their inner voice, who question surface-level narratives, who see through the fog, those people can't be controlled. They can't be sold another cheap escape. They can't be frightened into silence. They can't be pacified with dopamine hits and slogans. They see too much. That's why your third eye had to be shut down. Not because it's useless, but because it works. It's not just that they ignored the third eye. They made you afraid of it. Think about it. From the moment you could ask questions, you were taught what not to believe. Anything that couldn't be measured, monetized, or proven under fluorescent lights was labeled nonsense. Intuition became woo-woo. Spirituality became superstition. Inner vision became delusion. You were trained to trust only what could be dissected, not what could be felt. But ask yourself, who benefits from that? It wasn't always like this. In ancient cultures, intuitive knowledge was seen as the highest form of intelligence. Priests, mystics, and scientists were often one and the same. The mind wasn't split in half. Logic and intuition weren't enemies, they were allies. But something changed. A new narrative was introduced, one that favored obedience over inquiry, compliance over connection. Slowly, method replaced mystery, doctrine replaced direct experience, and we were told that what we cannot see doesn't exist, but there's power in what you can't see. That's exactly why they buried it. Because inner vision doesn't require permission. It doesn't need external validation. When you tap into it, you don't need the experts to tell you what's real. You don't need institutions to approve your path. You become self-guided, and that makes you dangerous. So instead of nurturing your ability to perceive from within, the system flooded your world with distractions, bright lights, fast media, constant entertainment, opinions dressed up as facts, beliefs packaged as truths, and you, once open and curious, were trained to look outward for everything you should have been discovering within. Education systems played their part. Schools didn't teach you how to access altered states of awareness or how to listen to the intelligence of your own body. They taught you how to memorize, repeat, and obey. The curriculum wasn't built to awaken, it was built to contain. Critical thinking was only allowed within pre-approved boundaries. Step outside, and suddenly you were difficult, unfocused, disobedient. What they really meant was uncontrollable. And religion, which once held ancient symbols of awakening, was restructured into rigid systems of guilt and hierarchy. The mystical became forbidden. Direct experience with the divine was called heresy. Suddenly, the sacred was only accessible through an authority, a priest, a book, a building. You could no longer go within. You had to go through them. Even the word third eye has been warped. Say it in public and watch how quickly the room shifts. People roll their eyes, laugh, or shut down. Not because they know what it means, but because they've been conditioned to fear what they don't understand. This is not just a social habit, it's psychological engineering. Ridicule is a powerful tool of suppression. Make people mock something long enough, and they'll never get close enough to see what it really is. But beneath all the labels and fear-mongering, the truth remains. Your third eye is real. Your perception isn't broken, it's been buried. And no matter how much noise the system blasts at you, there's still a voice inside that knows. It always has. That quiet sense, that intuitive pull, that flash of insight you were taught to dismiss, that's your signal trying to cut through the static. And the more you ignore it, the dimmer it gets. Until one day, you don't just distrust your intuition, you fear it. And when that happens, the system has won. Because now, they don't need to silence you. You'll do it yourself. This isn't just about fluoride or frequency. It's about belief. If they can shape what you think is possible, they don't need to police your body. They already have your mind. And the greatest way to limit a population isn't through force. It's through perception. Keep their eyes closed, and they'll never notice the cage. Keep their third eye sealed, and they'll never ask what lies beyond the illusion. But here's the secret they never wanted you to know. One glimpse is all it takes. One moment of clear seeing, and the spell begins to break. The world doesn't look the same, and neither do you. When the third eye begins to open, something strange happens. And it's not dramatic or theatrical like the movies make it seem. It's subtle at first, quiet, like a distant hum that's always been there, but suddenly you hear it. You start noticing things you used to overlook. Patterns, feelings, energy in a room, synchronicities that feel too precise to be chance. You start thinking thoughts you didn't know you had. It's like the background of your life starts speaking to you directly. And for the first time, you realize that reality isn't what you were taught, It's layered, flexible, and alive. Most people assume perception is only what comes through their eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and skin. But that's the shallow end of consciousness. The third eye is what lets you sense what isn't obvious. It gives meaning to the patterns your conscious mind doesn't pick up on. It connects dots faster than thought. It brings clarity to confusion. And most importantly, it allows you to feel what's true, even when no one else sees it. You start waking up in the middle of the night at odd hours with ideas that feel like they're not entirely yours. You feel drawn to new information, new people, new thoughts, and not out of boredom, but because something in you is guiding you. Call it intuition, inner knowing, alignment. Doesn't matter what label you use. What matters is this: your perception has started to stretch. You're no longer a passive observer of reality. You're in conversation with it. And here's the part that shakes people the most. Once your third eye starts opening, the illusions of the world don't just become visible, they become unbearable. The small talk, the endless scrolling, the artificialness of media, the forced routines, they all start to feel like noise. You begin to crave silence, nature, and meaningful connection. Your nervous system doesn't want chaos anymore. It wants coherence, and you can't pretend anymore. That's the beginning of real change. This isn't spiritual fluff, it's measurable. Studies have shown that people in deep meditation enter brainwave states where the hemispheres of the brain sync up. That kind of neurological coherence leads to insights, visions, and intuitive clarity that don't come from rational deduction. It comes from tapping into something bigger. Think about it. Your brain is an electrical system. Your pineal gland is a magnetic sensor. And your thoughts? They're not confined to your skull. They're frequencies. And when you're in alignment, you don't just receive, you transmit. But society doesn't prepare you for this. There's no instruction manual on what to do when you suddenly feel like reality is more fluid than fixed. When time bends, when ideas appear, when you feel connected to something bigger than your own life. You try to explain it, and people don't get it. Not because you're wrong, but because they haven't seen it yet. And this is where the journey gets hard. Because seeing with the third eye isn't about convincing others. It's about trusting yourself when it's easier not to. That's why so many people turn back. They catch a glimpse, feel the edges of something bigger, and then retreat into the comfort of normal. Because awakening is uncomfortable. It disrupts everything you thought you knew. It makes you question what you've been building your life around. It burns away illusions. And sometimes, that means losing the safety of ignorance. But once you've started to see, you can't unsee. The illusions don't reattach. The blindfold doesn't go back on. And here's the truth they won't tell you. The moment you begin to truly see, you begin to truly live. You stop moving on autopilot. You start noticing the synchronicities that used to pass you by. You realize that reality has been whispering to you your whole life. You just didn't know how to listen. And now, you're finally beginning to hear it. There's a substance inside you right now that could change the way you see everything. Not metaphorically, literally. It's called DMT, known in some circles as the spirit molecule. It's one of the most powerful naturally occurring compounds in existence. It's been found in plants, animals, and yes, even in the human body. But here's the part they don't want to talk about. Your brain may be producing it in the very gland they've spent generations ignoring, the pineal gland. And what this substance does is nothing short of extraordinary. People who've experienced DMT report vivid visions, out-of-body experiences, a sense of timelessness, contact with what some describe as higher intelligence. These are not vague impressions. These are complete shifts in perception, where the boundaries of space and self dissolve. And whether you believe these reports are real or not, the fact remains. Something is happening, and it points to a level of consciousness far beyond what mainstream science dares to explain. The ancient world already knew this. Indigenous tribes across the globe have used DMT-containing plants in sacred rituals for centuries. Ayahuasca in the Amazon, snuffs in Central America, various herbs in African and Asian traditions. These weren't for recreation. These were tools of initiation. gateways into higher dimensions of awareness. They were used to gain insight, clarity, healing, and connection to the unseen world. And yet, in the modern world, these practices have been ridiculed, criminalized, or reduced to counterculture rebellion. Why? Because if you can access truth directly, truth about yourself, your reality, and your connection to everything, you become less dependent on external control. You start asking different questions. You stop being manageable. Now, to be clear, this isn't a push toward drug use. You don't need to ingest anything to access these states. Your own body is capable of producing DMT naturally, particularly during moments of deep meditation, breathwork, near-death experiences, and even sleep. Think about that. Your biology is wired for awakening. Your pineal gland may be the very bridge between the physical and the non-physical. And yet, that bridge is being left to rot, calcified by chemicals, and dismissed as nonsense. Because if you knew that you already carried the tools for expanded consciousness inside you, what would you stop chasing outside? Science is only just beginning to catch up. Researchers are now exploring the link between DMT and the pineal gland, although studies remain scarce. Why do you think that is? Why is there so little funding for the one substance that could revolutionize how we understand consciousness? Because the implications are too destabilizing. DMT challenges the very foundation of what we think is real. It blurs the line between the brain and the soul. It suggests that perception isn't confined to flesh and neurons. It's something more, something bigger. And that's terrifying to a world built on the illusion of material limits. If your mind can extend beyond time, if your consciousness can detach from the body and still remain aware, then everything you've been taught about being human needs to be rewritten. The school books, the religions, the institutions, all of it. Because suddenly, the human experience isn't just about survival, production, and obedience. It becomes a journey of awakening. You've likely already touched these states without realizing it. That dream that felt more real than waking life. That moment during meditation where you lost your sense of time. That flash of insight that came from nowhere. These are glimpses, fragments of what your consciousness is capable of when it's not boxed in by the limitations of conditioned thought. Your body is a portal. Your mind is a key. And the third eye, it's the door they've tried to make you forget even exists. DMT isn't the awakening itself. It's a spark, a signal, a hint. It shows you what's possible when perception is no longer filtered through the lens of fear and control. But you don't need to chase the molecule. You need to awaken the mechanism behind it. Because once your pineal gland is reactivated, your vision returns, not just visually, but existentially. You see yourself differently. You see others differently. You begin to recognize that consciousness isn't trapped in your skull. It's everywhere, and you're part of it. You don't need a guru, a temple, or a psychedelic ceremony to activate your third eye. You need clarity, consistency, stillness, and most of all, intent. Because despite what you've been told, the power you're seeking doesn't live outside of you. It's already wired into your biology. The ancient traditions knew this, and science is slowly catching up. When you bring breath, focus, and frequency together, you begin to switch on the parts of your brain designed to receive something more. You begin to remember how to see. Start with the breath. Conscious breathing is the most overlooked key to altered perception. When you control your breath, you control your nervous system. When the nervous system calms, the mind clears. Practices like pranayama, alternate nostril breathing, and breath holds have been used for thousands of years to stimulate energy flow toward the pineal gland. These aren't spiritual gimmicks, they're physiological upgrades. You're increasing oxygen, altering CO2 levels, and shifting brainwave activity. You're literally changing the electrical state of your consciousness. And when you pair breath with sound, the results deepen. Certain frequencies, particularly between 432 Hz and 963 Hz, are said to resonate with the pineal gland and create a vibrational environment that supports activation. Ancient chants, tuning forks, binaural beats, solfeggio tones. These aren't random. They're tools, instruments for internal awakening. When you expose your brain to these sounds in a calm, meditative state, you help create coherence. You reduce the internal noise and give the deeper voice a chance to speak. Then there's light. Not artificial light, but natural light. The pineal gland is photosensitive. It responds to sunlight, especially during sunrise and sunset. That's why so many ancient cultures faced the sun in prayer or meditation, not as worship, but as alignment. Early morning sunlight contains the full spectrum of light without the intensity that damages the eyes. Sun gazing, done safely and gradually, is believed to energize the pineal gland and recalibrate your internal rhythm. When your body is aligned with natural light cycles, your perception begins to return to its original state, clear, receptive, synchronized. You also need silence. And not just external silence, but internal. In a world addicted to distraction, stillness is rebellion. Meditation, particularly focused on the space between your eyebrows or the center of your brain, redirects your attention to the third eye. With practice, the stillness becomes fertile ground. You begin to feel pressure in that area, warmth, pulsing, visuals behind closed eyes. These are not hallucinations. These are signs that the system is waking up. Neurons are firing. Pathways are forming. You are beginning to see. It's also worth looking at the body. Your posture, your spinal alignment, your hydration, your gut health. These all influence your mind. The body is not separate from the third eye. It's the vessel through which you activate it. Kundalini Yoga understood this, combining breath, movement, and focus to move energy upward. When the energy reaches the pineal gland, something shifts. Awareness expands. Thought slows. You begin to witness yourself from a higher vantage point. And this isn't just ancient wisdom. Neuroscientific studies on long-term meditators show increased gray matter density in regions tied to attention, emotion regulation, and sensory processing. EEG scans reveal that altered states of consciousness correlate with coherent, stable brainwave patterns, theta, delta, gamma. In these states, people report insights, visualizations, and a deep sense of interconnectedness. This isn't delusion, it's design. You don't need to be perfect to access this. You just need to show up, repeatedly, intentionally. Every time you breathe deeply, close your eyes, and focus inward, you're chipping away at the layers of conditioning. You're peeling back the noise, and eventually, the vision returns. You'll start to see what was always there, but hidden behind distraction. You'll feel drawn to truth, authenticity, clarity. You'll speak differently, choose differently, think differently, because perception isn't just what you see, it's how you choose to engage with reality. And once your inner lens is clean, the entire world sharpens. The best part? No one can take that from you. Not once it's yours. Not once it's real. The rituals aren't the power. You are. The techniques just remind you of what you've forgotten, that you were born to see clearly. You were born to know. The third eye isn't mystical, it's mechanical. And the moment you begin to activate it, the system starts to lose its grip, because people who see through illusion don't obey it. When the third eye opens, the system begins to fail, not because it breaks, but because it can no longer deceive you. You stop buying into the story they've sold you your whole life. You no longer see success as a job title, intelligence as memorized data, or happiness as consumption. Everything begins to shift. The propaganda, the noise, the endless distractions, they lose their hold. Why? Because they were never that strong to begin with. They only worked because you couldn't see them. And once you do, it's like trying to believe in a lie you've already exposed. The illusion becomes transparent, and that makes you ungovernable. You stop responding to fear the way they expect. You stop seeing authority as truth and start demanding that truth justify its authority. You're no longer impressed by credentials, uniforms, or confident voices. You look at energy, intent, integrity. You start to realize that half of what passes as leadership is nothing more than performance, and that those who truly see have never needed to dominate others to feel powerful. This shift threatens everything, because the world you live in isn't just built on systems, it's built on perception. Money is belief, status is perception, politics is theater, consumerism is emotional manipulation, and all of it falls apart when people start trusting their inner sense more than external direction. That's why the third eye is never mentioned in schools. That's why people who speak about intuition are labeled as irrational, unscientific, or worse, unstable. Because a population that listens to its inner compass doesn't follow instructions blindly. It doesn't fall in line. It doesn't make decisions out of fear or desperation. It slows down. It asks questions. It demands more. Now imagine millions of people waking up to that level of perception. Not checking out of society, but seeing through it. Not becoming passive or indifferent, but laser-focused on what matters. These people don't fall for clickbait. They don't get pulled into manufactured outrage. They don't panic when the media tells them to be afraid. They see the patterns. They recognize the manipulation. They trust the silence between the noise. And when people like that connect, everything changes. Because consciousness spreads faster than fear when it's rooted in clarity. That's why your awakening is not just personal, it's political. Not in the sense of party lines or protest slogans, but in the deeper sense of power. Who holds it? Who benefits from your blindness? Who profits from your confusion? And what happens when you stop giving it away? The moment you begin to think for yourself from a place of inner knowing, you become a glitch in their system. One they can't track, can't market to, can't predict. That's what real freedom looks like. Not rebellion for the sake of chaos, but stillness so deep that it refuses to be shaken by noise. They don't fear riots. They fear clarity, because clarity leads to alignment. And aligned people don't need fixing, distracting, or medicating. They need space. They need truth. And they need each other. That's why the system keeps you divided, isolated, addicted to validation. It's not just about control. It's about fragmentation. Because if you ever stopped seeing yourself as separate from the whole, you'd realize just how much power you actually have. The third eye reveals the web beneath the surface, the energy that connects everything. It doesn't just change how you see the world. It changes how you participate in it. And suddenly, you're not a consumer. You're a creator. You're not a victim of circumstance. You're a mirror of intention. You're not lost in the fog. You are the clarity that cuts through it. And here's the paradox. The clearer your perception becomes, the less you need to prove it. You don't argue to be right. You speak to be real. You don't try to convince. You reflect. And that's what the system can't replicate. It can copy language, trends, movements, but it can't manufacture the presence of someone who truly sees. That presence disrupts everything. It softens the hardened. It wakes the sleeping. It reminds people what truth feels like when they've forgotten. That's why your third eye matters more than you've ever been told. Because when you open it, you don't just change your life. You become the kind of person that changes the atmosphere of every room you walk into. And that, more than anything, is what this world needs right now. Once your third eye opens, life doesn't get easier, it gets clearer. And that clarity changes everything. You start to recognize what was never yours to carry. The roles you've been performing, the beliefs you absorbed, the goals you were taught to chase, they begin to lose their grip. You stop trying to fit into systems that drain you. You stop measuring your worth by productivity or approval. You don't abandon life. You just start living it from the inside out. The shift is internal, but it echoes externally. You begin to say no, not out of defiance, but alignment. You stop showing up where your soul goes silent. You leave the conversations that shrink you. You release relationships built on illusion. It's not about becoming cold or distant. It's about becoming honest. The third eye doesn't make you special. It makes you sovereign. And that sovereignty demands integrity with every choice you make. Your vision becomes purpose-driven. You no longer move from reaction, but from intention. You wake up and ask not what you need to do, but who you need to be. And in that question, everything softens. The pressure, the rush, the comparison, all of it fades. You stop trying to outperform everyone around you, because you finally understand that the real race was never out there. It was always inward, against your own conditioning, against the voice that told you you had to be more, do more, prove more. But now that voice is quiet, and in the stillness, you hear something else. Your intuition, your clarity, your truth. This is the intelligence they never taught you to trust, because it doesn't speak in data or logic. It speaks in energy, resonance, and knowing. It tells you when something's right before you can explain why. It nudges you toward paths your mind wouldn't have chosen, but your soul knows it must walk. That's what real intelligence looks like when it's unchained from the narrative. It's not about being correct. It's about being connected. You begin to notice how your body responds to truth, how your gut tightens in falsehood, how your chest softens in alignment. You read people differently, not by their words, but by their frequency. You don't just listen to what's said, you feel what's meant, and you trust it, because that trust has been earned through practice, through presence, through letting go of everything that no longer resonates. And this is when things really begin to transform. Opportunities arrive that match your new vibration. Conversations deepen, time stretches, coincidences multiply. It's not magic, it's coherence. You've become a tuning fork for truth, and your outer world begins to mirror your inner clarity. But this shift isn't just for your benefit, it's for the people around you. Because once you begin living from a higher intelligence, your presence gives others permission to do the same. You model what it looks like to move from soul, not survival, to live from essence, not expectation. And that impact ripples far beyond anything you can measure. That's why your awakening matters. Not just because of what it changes in you, but because of what it awakens in others. You stop participating in the noise, and your silence becomes louder than words. You stop chasing power, and your stillness becomes magnetic. You stop fighting for a place in systems that were never built for your freedom, and your very existence becomes rebellion. But here's the part most people miss. Awakening is not a finish line. It's a daily choice. To stay open, to stay honest, to stay aligned. The third eye doesn't turn you into a prophet or a master. It just strips away everything that isn't real, and that can feel lonely at times. But the solitude isn't punishment, it's preparation for a different kind of life, one where truth is your compass, one where your vision guides your steps, even when the path isn't clear. And if you've made it this far, there's a reason. You didn't find this by accident. Something in you is already waking up. And if you want to go deeper, if you want to receive the knowledge we can't share here, join our free newsletter, Insights Academy. We share the uncensored truths they don't want circulating. And yes, you'll also receive a free digital copy of the Kybalion, but this isn't a reward, it's a signal. Don't miss it, because the world isn't going to pause for your awakening. But once you awaken, the world will never look the same. There is no ceremony, no explosion, no lightning strike. When the third eye finally opens, it's quieter than that. It doesn't announce itself. It dissolves what's false and reveals what's always been true. You don't suddenly gain power, you simply stop giving it away. The shift happens in layers, in moments, in the space between thoughts where truth finds you. And once it does, you begin to see everything differently, not just with more detail, but with more meaning. You realize that life hasn't been happening to you, it's been happening through you. That every distraction, every setback, every strange inner knowing that you couldn't explain was leading you back to this point. The moment you decided to see clearly, not with your physical eyes, but with the sense behind them. The part of you that isn't limited by language or logic. The part of you that sees what can't be seen, feels what can't be said, knows without needing proof, and you don't have to explain it. This isn't about convincing anyone. It's about recognizing that some truths live too deep for words. They must be lived, not spoken. The third eye isn't a badge you wear or a trick you perform. It's a return to clarity, to intuition, to the quiet certainty that you are more than a name, a job, a past. You are awareness. And when that awareness sharpens, your reality responds. The choices you make start to align with what you actually value. You stop running toward what looks good and start walking toward what feels right. You listen more, speak less. You observe without judging. You notice the way energy shifts when someone enters the room, the way silence sometimes says more than noise, the way nature speaks in patterns and pauses. You stop trying to escape the present moment because now you see that the present is the only place anything ever truly happens. But don't mistake clarity for comfort. Seeing clearly means facing what you've ignored. It means taking responsibility for the parts of your life built on autopilot. It means no longer blaming the system while still participating in it. Because now you know, and once you know, you can choose. Not react, choose. Not justify, align. Not conform, create. And you will create. Not just content or careers, but realities, energies, ripples. Your presence, once shaped by anxiety or survival, begins to carry weight. It steadies the people around you. It speaks before you do. You become a mirror, reflecting truth, not because you know all the answers, but because you're finally asking the right questions. That's what the third eye gives you, not certainty, but vision. A way of moving through the unknown without needing it to be safe. And when the world tries to pull you back, as it always will, you won't panic. You'll pause, because you've seen beyond the veil. And what you saw didn't just change your mind, it changed your center. Your reference point is no longer the noise, it's the silence beneath it. And from that place, you move, intentionally, clearly, unapologetically. Not better than anyone, just rooted, awake, real. If more people lived this way, quietly awake, deeply aligned, trusting the eye within rather than the chaos around, the world wouldn't need saving. It would simply need remembering. Remembering that we were never meant to see through screens, but through spirit. That truth isn't something you find. It's something you remove everything else to reveal. That the eye was never shut. It was just covered. Now the covering is gone. Now you've seen. Now the work begins. Not out there, but in here. In every breath, every choice, every moment you decide to stay awake instead of slipping back into sleep. And if this video resonated with you, let us know by commenting, "I understood it."